perspective that the biggest problem we have in the world is oil and our use of oil. But I wanted to make sure I was addressing everybody, because everybody has a different opinion about what the big problems are. So I went around and I asked what other people thought were the biggest problems in the world. And these are some of the answers I got. This guy is a Russian oil pipeline inspector, that's what he said.
I think the world's biggest problem is oil shortage.
Okay, why do you think that?
I think because all oil belongs to America now. They will increase the prices of the world, and they can control them all the world.
Okay.
We can't live without oil.
Well, are they raising prices artificially? This is a report that came out of the United States back in the year 2001. Some Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon and Bob Orr, a CBS newsman, were studying oil prices for the last 2 years. And this is what they found. A Chevron memo, which is Chevron's big oil company in the United States, warns the oil industry would never see higher profits if it didn't reduce the amount of gasoline being refined. In other words, if you don't cause a shortage, you'll never see higher profits. This was inside the oil company's inner memos. It says, if the U.S. petroleum industry doesn't reduce its refining capacity, it will never see any substantial increase in refining margins, in other words, profits. In other words, if you don't create a shortage, you'll never see higher profits. This document says point blank, look, if you really want to boost your profits, you have to reduce your refinery capacity, said Senator Wyden. Well, that's just a note in somebody's office. Did they actually go ahead and try something like that? Well, here we see in the year 2004, Santa Monica, California. In the year 2004 was right when the price of oil was starting to go up because shortages were starting to happen. It says the Foundation for Taxpayer and Consumer Rights today released internal Shell documents showing the Bakersfield, California oil refinery is set to close and be demolished. They are set to demolish its Bakersfield refinery despite the fact the site had the biggest refinery margins of profits per gallon of any Shell refinery in the nation as of yesterday. So in other words, they were going to destroy a refinery even though it was profitable and it worked just fine. Why would you destroy a refinery that was profitable? Shell claimed it was not economically viable to keep the refinery open, but it has refused to put it up for sale. Now let me explain something. You can have a lot of oil in the ground, but if you can't refine it, it's no use to anybody. So really an effective way to create a shortage is at the refinery end. It's like, you know, if you have meat and you can't cook it, it's not any good to anybody. So anyway, they said that it was not economically viable to keep the refinery open. But the Shell document said the Bakersfield refinery margin was at $23 per barrel. It topped all of Shell's refineries in the nation. In other words, it was the most profitable refinery in the country. So that's a lie, right? So why did they demolish it? Or why were they going to demolish it? Was it because of environmental reasons? Well, according to the manager, it says we have made quantum steps, improvements in our environmental compliance. Finishing well under target again for the second straight year. So it wasn't environmental reasons that they're going to close it. It wasn't because it didn't make any money they're going to close it. And they weren't even going to sell it. I mean, usually if you're a company and you want to get rid of a business, right, you sell it. They weren't even going to sell it. So they weren't going to sell it. It was making a profit, and it wasn't for environmental reasons, so why are they going to demolish it? Well, if you put the two together, you reduce refining capacity, which creates higher profits. What happens during oil shortages? Well, back in 1973, get my little pointer out here. Back in 1973, when there was the OPEC oil shortage, Exxon, which was then Exxon Mobil now, recorded world record profits of any company any time in history. In 1979, the oil town of Houston, when the whole world was in a depression because of the oil shortage, the oil town of Houston was having a great time. They boomed. In the year 2000, when there was a Venezuela oil strike causing shortages, Chevron and other oil companies tripled their profits. So they love shortages because they get tremendous profits. What about this year? This last year, year 2004, you know, we all know the price of oil is going extremely high now. And here we see that the top 10 oil companies in the world made $100 billion. $100 billion. Let me give you an idea how big that is. Just for instance, one oil company, Exxon Mobil, made $26 billion, one oil company. The next biggest company was Walmart. They made $10 billion. And then you got the petrochemical companies, and they're down around a couple $billion. $26 billion for one company. And they create a little manipulation with that. It's an interesting thing. This is the top 23 companies in the world, private industries. And the ones in red are oil and gas companies. Was there 2, 4, 6, 8? 8 of the top 23 are oil and gas companies. And then you got banks who loan out to oil and gas companies that are also up there. Now I want to give you another little secret about this. Let me see, I need you guys in the first front row to stand up. Okay, now I need you to come out here. Okay. See, I used to ask for volunteers and nobody would come, so I found a way to get people up here. Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything dangerous. Yet. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little history lesson here. First of all, how do you get the string out of here? Okay, there we go. Okay, so David Rockefeller, as you might know, he was the first guy who ever discovered oil or really brought it to the surface and make a lot of money off it back in the 1890s. And he became extremely wealthy through the use of oil because he caught it just at the time the Industrial Revolution was happening and the demand for oil was just going up a lot. So just to give you an idea how much wealth David had, if you take, let's say this is an example of how much oil or how much money the average person had in America, which was about 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter was the equivalent of how much money the average person had in America. David had this much wealth, which was 200 meters, to give you an idea of how much wealth he had. Now I'm going to show you what he did with that wealth, okay? You take a hold of that. You're the U.S. government. No, you're the oil industry first. So what he did was he started wrapping up the oil industry really fast. He controlled 90% of the oil industry in the United States, which was then the Saudi Arabia of oil at the time. And then he brought in the U.S. government. See, he knew he could never be pulled in here. You guys know each other real well, don't you? You know each other really well? Well, you get to know each other better after today. So then he wrapped up the government because he knew he wanted to be the President of the United States. But he knew they'd never elect him. So he created what's called the Council of Foreign Relations, which is a group of private businessmen, media men, and politicians who get together to discuss the policies of the United States outside of, you know, government official elected people, more or less. If you want to know, it was the Council of Foreign Relations that really pushed for the Iraq War. Before it was like 6 months before it even happened. And then he brought in the media. Well, the media hated David, so they started writing real negative stuff about David. You know what you do when somebody writes negative stuff about you is you just buy them out. So he bought up 26 of the nation's largest newspapers, and pretty soon everybody got the idea, hey, you better not write bad things about David or you're going to lose your job. Then he brought in the medical industry. You can come in there. Step right in there. Okay. Well, back in those days, homeopathy was the normal way to be cured. But then drugs started coming into the market, and doctors, you know, cutting people up and stuff like that. And David saw a way